today is our very last episode, our very last interview, and it's going to be with Mary DiCamillo. She has been working with students with learning differences and special needs since 1990, so a few decades now, which is incredible. She's had loads of experience, and we are very excited to talk with her and just overall get her perspective and advice for other piano teachers who are working with students with special needs and how to go forward with them.
I'm Mary DiCamillo, and I'm a piano instructor. I'm also a professional accompanist and a music therapist. I've been a music therapist since 1990. I have a master's degree in special education, a doctoral degree in education, and my BFAs in music therapy. I trained at North Robbins at NYU in their music therapy clinic. I'm also a neurologic music therapist, so my specialty in music therapy is working with children with learning disabilities. And also my other specialty, I work in pre- and perinatal music therapy.
How would you describe music therapy to someone who may not know exactly what it is?
Yeah, so music therapy is a profession like physical therapy, occupational therapy. We are an allied health profession. When people ask me what music therapy is, I just tell them it's like physical therapy or occupational therapy, but use musical skills to work on non-musical goals. For instance, like if somebody has a stroke, maybe their goal is to learn to speak fluently again. So we're going to use singing and vocalization techniques to help them to re-educate their vocal apparatus and retrain their brain. As a music therapist, I'm usually working on both at the same time. I'm working on pedagogical goals. They're obviously trying to make progress on their instrument, but also at the same time, we're on another track working on socialization, eye contact, extending how long can they sit at the piano, extending their focus of attention, increasing their motor skills, long-term, short-term memory, all those different cognitive pieces that go with it, depending on the child. The work that we do is going to support their learning in school, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a great way to think about it. I didn't think about that, especially when you're teaching piano. I think, okay, we're teaching you musical skills, like good habits and stuff, but especially with kids with learning differences or disabilities, like teaching a lot of other skills that could be applied in school as well.
Absolutely. Like listening, following directions.
You have put it in a really succinct way. I like how you said, it's using music to achieve non-musical goals, which I think is really interesting.
That's the primary thing that a music therapist does. So many different kinds of disabilities, right? Labels give you information. They help you understand what are certain characteristics. Not everybody has every characteristic of every condition, but it helps you understand what are typical kind of processes or supports that children with those particular syndromes might need. A regular piano teacher would probably struggle with this child who didn't have experience, right? And then that might cause some emotional issues and behaviors. And then the child might give up because the approach isn't right. You're addressing the child's emotional needs and developmental needs so that you're constructing the right educational plan for them and using their documents. If they have a diagnosed learning disability, they should have a document called an IEP.
IEP is
It's an individualized education plan. And knowing what their goals are on the IEP will inform your pedagogy. And you're going to kind of assess, you're going to do a baseline and see what can they do and what they can't do. And maybe for a few weeks you're going to try something, and if it's not working, you're obviously going to have to try something else. Color coding is really good.
Therese and I do that with some of our students. So she took the entire piano and put the colors, she labeled it with stickers all the way up. And so he knows the notes by saying the colors.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's where you have to start. Especially with kids who are on the autism spectrum, they seem to have a hard time, if they're young, they have a hard time with directionality. A child that has attention deficit disorder, there's all kinds of permutations of that, right? But just knowing that they're going to need a lot of breaks, right? That they may not be able to have a 30-minute lesson. When I work with a child with ADHD, I have something going every 2 minutes, and I change it every 2 minutes, because what happens in the brain when you have ADHD, there's a chemical called dopamine. And dopamine is necessary to keep your attention and focus going. But if a child has ADHD and they're lacking dopamine, you need to give them a novel stimulus to keep the dopamine going, right? So you have to have shorter activities, and you have to be really quick with your transition so you don't lose them. Having fun little brain break games are fun to do.
I think that'd be really helpful, especially for students with ADHD online. Like they're so used to like the game realm being online too. So a
Exactly.
lot of the times like they need that brain break. So it's such a great incentive.
For little ones, like K through
Yeah, like
5, it
the
works really, really well. Sometimes just being playful and surprising them is going to give them that dopamine boost and keep them engaged in the lesson. And you got to be really consistent. So never change the plan. Tell them exactly what you expect and reinforce the behavior immediately. And then you got them. Then they're with you.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think always having a plan is super important because I need like clear direction. And if you're confused at
And
this,
don't
teacher, they
deviate
don't
from
know.
it. What you make sure that's how they trust you. When things are concrete and follow through is immediate, then they feel safe and they trust you. I let them know that from the beginning, we all have the same goal. We want their child to progress in music and be happy and have enjoyment and learn, right? That's the same goal. But once I get to know their child, that I might need to create a customized learning plan for them. It may be that the traditional plan isn't where they're at right now. Big frustration that I find a lot with parents is, especially with young kids, they don't really, it's a developmental process of accepting your child's disability. And they don't really know and understand kind of what the trajectory is. They just know their child is behind, but they don't realize like how far behind they are or what level of intensity of service that they need. So I have to think about what is the best pedagogical plan for the child. We try some things and see how they're working. And if they're not working, then we either need to dial back or go ahead. I'll give you an example of a student I just got 2 weeks ago. The mom called me because she was interested in reading intervention because I'm a reading specialist. She said, "Oh, you're a music therapist. I see pianos in the background. Tell me about that. But I'm interested in piano lessons for my son." I'm like thinking that her child has dyslexia, right? Come to find out, I do the first lesson with them and I bring my favorite plan, and so like a lot of it is just loud and soft and open hands on the keyboard and exploration, right? The second lesson, I find out the child has extremely low tone. And he can't even sit upright at the keyboard by himself. And then I called her after the lesson and I said, "It seems like your child has more than dyslexia." Then she tells me all the rest that's going on. So I had to change the curriculum, and then I have to work on skills to build his tone so he will actually be able to do individual fingers, right? So we're going to start out by doing, what those little desk bells are? They're colored bells. So he has to get the motion of just going from left. He's confused about left and right. So like it's completely changed. So I got drums so he can practice hitting with the left hand and the right hand. We're going to do the desk bells like hot cross buns so he can associate colors with movement and directionality. And then we're going to work with just one hand, one note at a time. So I have to really, really break down the skills. And then eventually, then we can get back into a more traditional piano program. But that's going to take a while, right? His journey is going to be completely different. In that same neighborhood, the mom said his best friend wants to take piano too. So I said, "Okay, well, I'm in the neighborhood. I'll just drive over there." And then come to find out that this child is also on the autism spectrum, but he's completely different. He's gifted. So I'm like coming up with all these other things for him, doing songwriting and other things to really engage him. And he's talking about how music is like coding. And, that's a perfect example of 2 students who came to me for piano lessons who need a completely different program. I have another kid that has OCD. Her mom came up to me and she said, "She really prefers it when you don't write in her book." And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "I'm her teacher. I need to do that. I write notes for us." And she's like, "Well, she has OCD and we're working on that." I'm like, "Okay, well, this is a good goal for us to work on." So it might be something even as simple as that.
Earlier, you were mentioning like really catering to the students' like emotional and developmental needs as well on top of their learning. What would be a really good example of building that while teaching piano?
I'm always really attuned to my students' emotional state. So a lot of times we work with kids right when they get home from school, right?
Yeah.
Usually they're in the door. If it's a 3:00 lesson, they maybe had time to hit the restroom and grab a snack. You can tell by their body language, by the way they're speaking, their tone of voice, if they had a bad day or not, right? So I always do a little quick emotional check-in before we even start playing. So making sure that they are ready to learn. So I might say something like, it seems like you're, feeling a little tense today. How was school, right? or just don't even label the feeling for them. Allow them to express their feeling. And then we might talk about the fact that sometimes playing piano is a really good release for that. And if you're feeling anxious or angry or upset, just sitting and just letting go and playing is a great way to release that tension. I have another student that I work with actually in voice and piano. This child really has a high level of understanding of music, but developmentally he's only 6. So I brought in this song. The week before, he told me how much he loved the song. And he said, "Oh, Dr. Mary, I just want to let you know that I just love singing with you," right? And I'm like, my heart, right? So then I come back the next week ready to start the song because I know he loves it. We start working on the song. I start playing the introduction a little bit. And I see his eyes welling up a little bit. I said to him, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah, sometimes when I stare at the screen," because we're using an iPad, he said, "sometimes when I stare at the screen, it makes my eyes water." I said, "Okay, well, don't look at the screen. I'll just play," right? At the end of the lesson, he looks at me and he goes, "Are we done?" Like that. "Are we done?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay. We're done. All right, go ahead. You can go get your sister. We'll have a lesson with your sister." And he goes bolting out of the room. And then I hear him in the other room and he's just sobbing. He's crying. I'm like, oh, why is he so upset? The song touched him so emotionally. And I had no idea. No idea.
That's so sweet. Oh my goodness.
We have to know that music evokes tender emotions in our little people. And, I totally bought his story because the week before he told me how much he loved the song. But in the moment when he was experiencing the music, it so overwhelmed him emotionally.
Wow, that's really moving. And then, for your student to have that experience, like that's very cathartic.
And then I find out the background from the mom, what prompted this. See, there's so much related to, their experience in their life that they bring into the music studio, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize like the importance of like the surrounding issues going on. Because sometimes I just think I'm like, oh, they're here for piano. Here we are. Like I had this one student and he was like really maybe a little like struggling to focus for 1 week or 1 month in particular. And I was just like, okay, like he's just, he probably has a lot going on at school. And the mom lets me know, she's like, okay, we're really grateful to have you as a teacher because right now his dad is going in and out of the hospital. And I was like, I didn't know any of this. And I was like, I'm not checking in emotionally because I could tell there's something off, but I didn't know as a teacher if I talk about it.
My main takeaway would be just be as creative as possible. Just see the individual child and be able to customize a program for them and be patient with yourself. You're going to make mistakes. We all do. And don't beat yourself up. But the best thing you can do is get mentorship and supervision.
No, I think that's really important, mentorship, especially just reaching out to like the community or others who have years and years of experience.
When kids have like really rigid behaviors, that's a sign that something more is going on. So just like a good tip for teachers is like, trust your instinct, trust your gut, and keep your eyes wide open. And something that looks off to you, like do some fact finding. Try to figure out what's going on.
Anything. Story time.
So many. Well, I'll tell you about this one student that I had. And he actually started with violin with me. Really, really severe ADHD. I continued to work with him. Finally, when he was 13, something clicked. He was able to learn how to read music, and then he just took off. Just took off. He is now a violin performance major in college. And I was his piano teacher. After he switched to college, now I'm teaching him piano and music theory.
That's incredible.
This is a child that had severe ADHD. So the moral of that story is never give up. He eventually found his way, and now he's playing. He's taking lessons with the director, or with the concert master. Like, it's amazing. Incredible. He's playing all the concertos, right?
I feel like there's always a stigma that students with ADHD can't sit down, because especially with piano or violin, like you have to sit down and focus.
Hard, right?
There's a stigma that they can't do it, but I think that's, it's all about being flexible and finding that way to get them to focus.
And his mom was just so grateful. I talked to her not too long ago. She's like, yeah. He's starting his second year of college, that's in the fall.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
That's
Super
so
cool.
sweet. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to meet. That story just made my day. It was very inspirational.